Welcome to Snoozecast, the podcast designed to help you fall asleep. Find us on snoozecast.com and follow us on Instagram at snoozecast to find behind-the-scenes content. If you enjoy our show, please write a review on the Apple Podcasts app. Please know that we read and appreciate everyone, and it helps our show get found by new listeners. Here's a recent review we loved. The subject line is, "Love falling asleep to incredible authors." It goes, "Wonderful resource for those of us who struggle to sleep. Excellent pace, voice, and content. Love that there are many incredible female authors featured. I hope to keep hearing the continuation of Pride and Prejudice, a true favorite." Thank you to whomever wrote this review. It made us smile to read it. And yes, we do plan on continuing with Pride and Prejudice. This episode is brought to you by our Patreon supporters and by kindly woodcarvers. Tonight, we'll read the opening to The Adventures of Pinocchio by Italian writer Carlo Collodi, published in 1883. Pinocchio was carved by a woodcarver named Gepetto as a wooden puppet, but he dreams of becoming a real boy. He is notably characterized for his frequent tendency to lie, which causes his nose to grow. Pinocchio is a cultural icon. He is one of the most reimagined characters in children's literature. His story has been adapted into many other media, notably the 1940 Disney film Pinocchio. Collodi often used the Italian Tuscan dialect in his book. For example, the name of Pinocchio's father, Gepetto, comes from the diminutive for Geppo, the Tuscan pronunciation of ceppo, meaning a log, stump, or block. Let's get cozy. Close your eyes. Relax your body into the softness of your bed. Now, take a few deep breaths. Centuries ago, there lived a king. My readers will say immediately, "No, you are mistaken. Once upon a time, there was a piece of wood. It was not an expensive piece of wood. Far from it. Just a common block of firewood. One of those thick, solid logs that are put on the fire in winter to make cold rooms cozy and warm. I do not know how this really happened, yet the fact remains that one fine day, this piece of wood found itself in the shop of an old carpenter. His real name was Mr. Antonio, but everyone called him Mr. Cherry, for the tip of his nose was so round and red and shiny that it looked just like a ripe cherry. As soon as he saw that piece of wood, Mr. Cherry was filled with joy. Rubbing his hands together happily, he mumbled half to himself, "This has come in the nick of time. I shall use it to make the leg of a table." He started to peel off the bark and shape the wood as a woodcarver does. But as he stood working away, he heard a little voice say, "Please be careful. I'm sensitive." What a look of surprise shone on Mr. Cherry's face. His funny face became still funnier. He turned his eyes about the room to find out where that wee little voice had come from, and he saw no one. He looked under the bench. No one. He peeped inside the closet. No one. He searched among the wood shavings. No one. He opened the door to look up and down the street, and still no one. "Oh, I see," he then said, laughing and scratching his wig. "It can easily be seen that I only thought I heard the tiny voice say the words. Well, well, to work once more." He struck a most solemn blow upon the piece of wood. "Hey, watch it!" cried the same far-away little voice. Mr. Cherry grew dumb. His eyes popped out of his head, his mouth opened wide, and his tongue hung down on his chin. As soon as he regained the use of his senses, he said, stuttering, "Where did that voice come from? When there's no one around? Might it be that this piece of wood has learned to weep and cry like a child? I can hardly believe it. Here it is, a common piece of firewood, good only to burn in the stove, the same as any other. Yet, might someone be hidden in it? If so, the worse for him." With these words, he picked up the log with both hands and started to inspect it carefully, and then began to shake it. He listened for the tiny voice. He waited 2 minutes. Nothing. 5 minutes. Nothing. 10 minutes. Nothing. "Oh, I see," he said, trying bravely to laugh, and ruffling up his wig with his hand. "It can easily be seen. I only imagined I heard the tiny voice. Well, well, to work once more." The poor fellow tried to sing a happy song in order to gain courage. He picked up the plane to make the wood smooth and even, but as he drew it to and fro, he heard the same tiny voice. This time, it giggled as it spoke. "Stop it! Hey, stop it! You're tickling me." This time poor Mr. Cherry fell, dumbfounded. When he opened his eyes, he found himself sitting on the floor. His face had changed. Even the tip of his nose, from red to deepest purple. In that very instant, a loud knock sounded on the door. "Come in," said the carpenter, not having an atom of strength left with which to stand up. At the words, the door opened, and a dapper little old man came in. His name was Gepetto, but to the boys of the neighborhood he was Polenta, on account of the wig he always wore, which was just the color of yellow corn pudding, known as a polenta in Italian. Now, Gepetto had a very bad temper. Woe to the one who called him polenta. He became as wild as a beast, and no one could soothe him. "Good day, Mr. Antonio," said Gepetto. "What are you doing on the floor?" "I'm teaching the ants their ABCs. Well, good luck to you. What brought you here, my friend Gepetto?" "My legs. And it may flatter you to know, Mr. Antonio, that I have come to you to beg for a favor." "Here I am, at your service," answered the carpenter, raising himself on to his knees. "This morning, a fine idea came to me. Let's hear it. I thought of making myself a beautiful wooden marionette. It must be wonderful, one that will be able to dance, fence, and turn somersaults. With it, I intend to go around the world to earn my crust of bread and cup of wine. What do you think of it?" "Bravo, polenta!" cried the same tiny voice which came from no one knew where. On hearing himself called polenta, Mr. Gepetto turned the color of a red pepper and, facing the carpenter, said to him, "Why do you insult me?" "Who is insulting you?" "You called me polenta." "I did not." "I suppose you think I did, yet I know it was you." "No." "Yes." "No." "Yes." And, growing angrier each moment, they went from words to blows and finally began to wrestle each other. When the fight was over, Mr. Antonio had Gepetto's yellow wig in his hands, and Gepetto found the carpenter's curly wig in his mouth. "Give me back my wig," shouted Mr. Antonio in a surly voice. "You return mine and we'll be friends." The two little old men, each with his own wig back on his own head, shook hands and swore to be good friends for the rest of their lives. "Well then, Mr. Gepetto," said the carpenter, to show he bore him no ill will, "what is it that you want?" "I want a piece of wood to make a marionette. Will you give it to me?" Mr. Antonio, very glad indeed, went immediately to his bench to get the piece of wood which had caused him so much concern. But as he was about to give it to his friend, with a jerk, it slipped out of his hands and knocked against poor Gepetto's thin legs. "Ow! Is this the gentle way, Mr. Antonio, in which you make your gifts? To hurl them at my shins? I might need to go to the hospital after this." "I swear to you I did not do it." "It was I, of course." "It's the fault of this piece of wood." "You're right, but remember you were the one to throw it at my legs." "I did not throw it." "Liar! Gepetto, do not insult me, or I shall call you polenta." On hearing himself called polenta, Gepetto lost his head and threw himself upon the carpenter. Then and there they gave each other a sound thrashing. After this fight, Mr. Antonio had 2 more scratches on his nose, and Gepetto had 2 buttons missing from his coat. Thus, having settled their accounts, they shook hands and swore once more to be good friends for the rest of their lives. Then Gepetto took the fine piece of wood, thanked Mr. Antonio, and limped away toward home. Tiny as Gepetto's house was, it was neat and comfortable. It was a small room on the ground floor with a tiny window under the stairway. The furniture could not have been much simpler. A very old chair, a rickety old bed, and a tumble-down table. A fireplace full of burning logs was painted on the wall opposite the door. Over the fire, there was painted a pot of something which kept boiling happily away and sending up clouds of what looked like real steam. As soon as he reached home, Gepetto took his tools and began to cut and shape the wood into a marionette. "What shall I call him?" he said to himself. "I think I'll call him Pinocchio. This name will make his fortune. I knew a whole family of Pinocchi once. Pinocchio the father, Pinocchia the mother, and Pinocchi the children, and they were all lucky. The richest of them begged for his living." After choosing the name for his marionette, Gepetto set seriously to work to make the hair, the forehead, the eyes. Fancy his surprise when he noticed that these eyes moved and then stared fixedly at him. Gepetto, seeing this, felt insulted and said in a grieved tone, "Hey, wooden eyes, why do you seem so real?" There was no answer. After the eyes, Gepetto made the nose, which began to stretch as soon as finished. It stretched and stretched and stretched till it became so long it seemed endless. Poor Gepetto kept trimming it and trimming it, but the more he trimmed, the longer grew that impertinent nose. In despair, he let it alone. Next, he made the mouth. No sooner was it finished than it began to smile and laugh. "Stop laughing," said Gepetto, but he might as well have spoken to the wall. "Stop laughing, I say," he roared in a voice of thunder. The mouth stopped laughing, but only to make a face and stick out a tongue instead. Not wishing to start an argument, Gepetto made believe he saw nothing and went on with his work. After the mouth, he made the chin, then the neck, the shoulders, the stomach, the arms, and the hands. As he was about to put the last touches on the fingertips, Gepetto felt his wig being pulled off. He glanced up, and what did he see? His yellow wig was in the marionette's hand. "Pinocchio, give me my wig." But instead of giving it back, Pinocchio put it on his own head, which was half covered up in it. At that unexpected trick, Gepetto became flabbergasted. "Pinocchio," he cried out, "you're not even finished yet, and you're this impudent." Once the legs and feet were made, he lifted the marionette under the arms and put him on the floor to teach him to walk. Pinocchio's legs were so stiff that he could not move them, and Gepetto held his hand and showed him how to put one foot after the other. When his legs were limbered up, Pinocchio started walking by himself and ran all around the room. He came to the open door, and with one leap, he was out into the street. Away he flew. Gepetto ran after him, but was unable to catch him, for Pinocchio ran in leaps and bounds. His two wooden feet, as they beat on the stones of the street, making as much racket as 20 peasants in wooden shoes. "Catch him! Catch him!" Gepetto kept shouting. But the people in the street, seeing a wooden marionette running like the wind, were so surprised that they stood still to stare and to laugh until they cried. At last, by sheer luck, a policeman strolled along, who, hearing all that noise, thought it might be a runaway horse, and stood bravely in the middle of the street, with legs wide apart, firmly resolved to stop it and prevent any trouble. Pinocchio spied the policeman from afar and tried his best to duck in between the legs of the big fellow, but without success. The policeman grabbed him by his incredibly long nose. It almost seemed made on purpose for catching, and returned him to Mr. Gepetto. All Gepetto could do was to hug Pinocchio round the waist and take him home. As he was doing so, Pinocchio threw himself on the ground and refused to take another step. He wanted to run free and explore. One person after another gathered around the two. Gepetto's a decent man, the townspeople discussed, but he's very, very strict, and I'm not sure the marionette will handle it well. We're afraid for the marionette's well-being. They kept bringing up more and more concerns about this, and how Gepetto must not hold a marionette child prisoner, as he had no experience as a parent. That, finally, the policeman ended matters by setting Pinocchio at liberty and dragging Gepetto to the town jail cell. The old fellow wailed like a child and said, "To think I just wanted a special marionette so I could travel the world." So, that little rascal, Pinocchio, was free now from the clutches of the policeman and running wildly across fields and meadows, taking one short cut after another toward home. In his wild flight, he leaped over brambles and bushes, and across brooks and ponds, as if he were a billy goat. On reaching home, he found the house door half open. He slipped into the room, locked the door, and threw himself on the floor, happy at his escape. Just then, he heard someone saying, "Cree, cree, crick." "Who is calling me?" asked Pinocchio. "I am." Pinocchio turned and saw a cricket crawling slowly up the wall. "Tell me, cricket, who are you?" "I am the talking cricket, and I have been living in this room for more than 100 years. The marionette said, "Do me a favor then and scram. I'm not interested in talking." "I refuse to leave this spot," answered the cricket, "until I have told you a great truth." "Tell it then, but be quick about it." "Okay. Boys who disobey their parents will never be happy." "Sing on, cricket, as you please. What I know is that tomorrow at dawn I'm leaving for good. If I stay here, the same thing will happen to me, which happens to all other boys and girls. They are sent to school, and they must study. As for me, let me tell you, nothing sounds worse than studying. It's much more fun, I think, to chase after butterflies, climb trees, and steal birds' nests. You little silly goose, don't you know that if you go on like that, you'll grow into a perfect donkey? Keep quiet, you little bug, cried Pinocchio. But the cricket, who was a wise old philosopher, continued in the same tone, "If you do not like going to school, why don't you at least learn a trade so that you can earn an honest living? Shall I tell you something?" asked Pinocchio. "Of all the trades in the world, there is only one that really suits me. And what can that be?" "Well, that of eating, drinking, sleeping, playing, and wandering around from morning till night."